All right, Greg, you could just look at me. If you could start off by saying and spelling your first and last name.
I'm Gregory Whitney, Gregory Whitney.
And you were the foreperson of the jury.
I was.
How did you get selected to be the foreperson?
We left it kind of up as a little vote. Like, we just kind of saw who was interested, and I threw my name out there, like, first, and then one of the other jurors he was interested too, but he decided, first come, first serve. If you want to do it, go ahead. And I was like, all right, because then I was also really curious, because during voir dire, the judge likes to ask, have you been on the jury before? And then when people said yes, she'd ask, were you a foreperson? And I'd be like, what? Nobody said yes, so I got really curious about that. I was just like, wonder what was the subsequent question after that, but I never got to hear it. So it's like, maybe next time now I'll hear it. So
it was as easy as that. You just got selected to be the foreperson.
Exactly, yep.
When did you understand that this case was high profile?
It was kind of in the beginning, like when we were filling out our questionnaire, I did hear a lot of the jurors and stuff, like potential jurors actually getting asked, like, as soon as they read the title, they're like, this is actually a pretty big case. And I was like, I had no clue, because I just moved here 4 years ago from Minnesota, and I don't really go on the news much. I get the occasional news blast on my phone, but that's about it. So I didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge of the case. And then as it unfolded, that's when I realized how kind of crazy and high profile it was.
Yeah, you have a case of an elected official on trial accused of killing a former reporter, so
yeah.
Definitely a high profile case. What was going through your mind listening to all the witness testimony?
At first it was a lot to process, so they gave us our notebooks to take as much notes as we can so we can confer to it all later in our actual deliberation, because we wouldn't get a transcript or anything like that, so we had to try to take as extensive notes as we could. And so for a lot of it, that's what I was trying to do, is make sure my notes were as accurate as possible, and then pick up as much of the pertinent details as I felt like were necessary to remember, because there were a lot of those instances where a piece of information would come out and it's like, that seems pretty important. I better write that down. So thankfully that's what helped keep me engaged, I'd say, the most in the case, because there were a lot of witnesses, and I felt like when we were on the prosecution side, the witnesses went pretty fast, and then as soon as the defense kind of came to their turn, that's when it slowed down a little bit. But that's understandable. They had to call a lot of people from out of state, and some of them missed flights, so it's like, I understand how that does turn out. But
by the end of it, how many pages of notes did you have?
Not as much as some of my other fellow jurors. We did have, because the last day we were supposed to have all of our chairs on our books, and one day they weren't there, so we were kind of confused, do we need them today? And then the marshal brought them over, and then he started handing them, and that's when I got to feel some of the other people's portfolios, and it made me feel kind of bad on my note-taking skills. So I was just like, some of you guys had some heavy portfolios, and then they just started laughing, and I'm just like, but yeah, no, I tried to take as extensive and detailed notes as I could, and a lot of the stuff I did take notes on did help actually out later when we were deliberating, so it was.
So I went on social media and asked people who are very interested in this case some questions they had, and so many people want to know about Tellis's narrative testimony and what you guys thought about it.
It was first time I ever even heard that as in an option. The judge says it's not very common one. She doesn't recommend it, apparently, because it's, as soon as you do so, you do put yourself out there for cross-examination, and it's a lot different when you're the one having to defend yourself rather than your defense attorney being a part of that actual thing. Because we thought Mr. Draskovich did a really good job at actually defending him for the first part of it, and then it wasn't really up until his narrative that's when we started, as the jury, started noticing a lot of holes in his testimony, and a lot of the way he responded just didn't sit well with us. So
do you think that if he didn't get up on the stand, there could have been a possibility of a hung jury?
I feel like it would have been a lot more likely, because that's, like I said, when he started speaking, that's when the holes started becoming more apparent. And if he didn't do that, maybe some people wouldn't have had the information that leaned him more towards guilty than unsure, because we did have a few unsures for a while, and then it wasn't until we started poking the holes in his narrative, comparing it with the evidence that we actually had, and that's was part of our duty as jury. You see something that's a testimony that's supposedly a lie, we're supposed to strike it from the record. We're not supposed to take that testimony.
In the beginning, how were the votes distributed amongst the jury?
I have actually, hold on, I have it right here. We had a nice little tally system going here.
Oh, okay.
So we did a little cup thing where we just we didn't want to make anyone feel like, singled out. So on our first day, we had 5 votes. And then, so the first one was, we had guilty of 7. 1 non-guilty because she wasn't around to hear about the unsure option. So then we had 4 unsure. So it was really 7-5 the first day. But then as we kind of tried to go through more of the evidence, it kind of got to 8-4. And then the third was probably when I don't remember what piece of evidence came up at that exact time. I think we were either comparing the vehicles, or it was one of the texts from Roberta that we ended up reading that swayed the majority of the group, and we ended up at 11-1. So then we just had the one person that we really didn't want to force them into a decision, because that's not what we're there for. We're there to look over all the evidence. So we tried to decide what evidence could we look over that would help your decision be less stressful and actually lead you towards a guilty vote, like for you, not from us leading you to it. So I think, it was definitely one of the texts between Roberta, and then she was kind of, I think, mainly hung up on the walk. So that's when we started getting the other laptops in and starting comparing the walk side by side, and that was kind of a lot of the majority of the details went from that. So.
Did your vote stay consistent throughout?
Yeah, I mean, at first, I wanted to be in the unsure category, but it was his narrative by testimony that really kind of swung me over to the guilty side. I was just like, I just couldn't find any plausible evidence that he supported that made his theory of why he thought this was all happening real. Like, the conspiracy, just too many people under that one umbrella. I understand you couldn't rule anyone out, but you do need to try to provide some proof that there's one in the first place.
Right, and you talked about some holes that you found in his narrative testimony. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The big one for me that I wrote down in my notes was at 12:09, he said he checked into his Planet Fitness gym. And so when we looked at that, and then we compared that to his forensics experts who gave the data location, and it only ever showed the 2 pings by his house. And that didn't sit well with me, because it's like you said, you used your phone to check in at a Planet Fitness, some minutes away. Your phone's not going to stay connected to that cell tower near your house. So for me, it was just like, that was a big one. And he said he threw away his old fob, so there was no other way for him to check in at that gym, according to him. He said he used his phone. We saw that wasn't true. So we had to, strike it from the record and try to figure out, well, then where could he have been at this time if he wasn't at the gym? And then we tried to do adding the timeline up, and that's when we just found the inconsistencies.
I want to ask you about that picture Mr. Draskovich showed during closing arguments. I think everybody's jaw dropped when we saw that picture, and it appeared that the person inside the Yukon Denali had hair. How were you guys able to get over that dispute?
For me, I kind of compared it to the story that what the witness gave when she saw the person at the park, how he had the hat and the hood combo. Maybe it was the same person. We still didn't have an agreement on whether or not her testimony actually was the same guy as Mr. Tellis. But we did have that theory where, well, if you're in the vehicle, you can't be wearing the hat. You're still going to want to hide your head. Maybe it was a hood, because the way the hair just kind of peeked out at the front didn't look like a normal hairline that somebody would have. So, and then one of the jurors, when she said she zoomed in on the video as it was driving away from the location where the construction worker was, she could kind of see the hairline almost recede, like it was more like a shadow. So didn't necessarily seem like hair as we further analyze the evidence.
Oh, I have to now go back and see it too. I know there was a video that Mr. Tellis was very adamant on the jury seeing. What was that video?
So it was one of his probate court videos that he had when he was trying to point out to the judge all the shady stuff that's happening with Compass Realty, and we did give it a watch. We tried to see what he really wanted us to see from it, and we had a couple other people even watch it after, we took turns trying to make sure everybody got their fair share watching it, and we did get the sense that, there was something going on, but there are a lot of loopholes in a lot of other systems. So we understood that, they tried their best to get it, to go further, but it's like at the same time, he does like to put himself in a bad situation, I'd have to say, with the judges, because he likes to try to talk a little too much over them. I found out, we found that during the video. There was a lot of times when the judge is telling him, all right, no, stop, I'm trying to talk, and he does like to try to keep it going. So it's like, it doesn't help his case, is all, because when we saw that, it kind of spoke more to his character as okay, well, when you're not getting your way, you don't you try to bulldoze over the conversation, it almost seems. So we saw the video, we tried to, see what he wanted us to see, but at the end of it, it kind of almost had a little bit more of a negative effect than positive, I'd have to say.
Wow. And yeah, I don't know if you know some history about his case, but he's actually fired several attorneys before, and he was representing himself for a little while. Well, I mean, I think he said that during his narrative testimony, but he also tried to get Judge Levitt off his case twice.
Yeah.
So there's some history behind his case for sure.
Exactly.
I'm curious to know if you watched him while other witnesses were testifying, because he was constantly like this. He seemed to make a lot of facial expressions.
I did notice that, and I mean, I've noticed a lot he has a lot of tics, nervous tics. I don't know, I couldn't say. Could they be lying tics? Possibly, because he did have a lot of moments, like you said, where it really did make me question his case, because the big one for me is, don't get me wrong, I know it's a touchy subject, but when he watched his SWAT video of when they went and got him and he had attempted suicide, he showed very little emotion to me. That to me would break my heart, seeing something like that being portrayed to the world. And then just later, when they're showing his home, I get it. It was another stressful time. He saw his wife, in the middle of the floor crying and everything, and everything was tore up. But that's when he decided to break down in tears. To me, that just seemed odd, because it's I know you don't want to be seen as, I'm trying to get sympathy, but it's at some point, it's hard to control your emotions, so you think that would be the time when I think personally he would have lost his emotions more than when he actually lost his emotions.
Was it sort of hard to stay focused during his narrative testimony because he went on for so long?
When the arguments kind of happened, that's when it was just all right, just answer the question. It does come down to that. He was just asking for yes or no, and it's he wanted to spin off on a story, and it seemed like he was never going to kind of get to the point, is what it seems. So that's why it's I do appreciate, Hamner being just yes or no. That's what I'm asking you. Can we please provide the facts? Because that's basically what we were there for, but it didn't seem like he wanted to provide facts. He just wanted to provide his theory.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to wait for this helicopter to go by. I want to know what you thought about the victim impact statements, both from Jeff Gehrman's family and also from Robert Tellis's family.
That's kind of where I'd say our sentencing kind of got a little tough, because that was when we saw a lot of the emotion. A lot of the trial, it was very, factual for a long time. And then that was the time when emotion got to become part of it. And that really affected a lot of our fellow jurors. I know when they started talking about Mr. Gehrman and how he was, basically the patriarchal uncle of his family, that spoke to a lot of our jurors. And that made it hard for our decision on sentencing between life with or without. And I'd say it was probably Tellis's family, and I think more or less we wanted at least that that chance, that chance of redemption. So that's why we went ultimately without.
Or with possibility?
With possibility, sorry. Yeah, we decided to go away from the without because we figured, he already thought his life was over. You give him without, he's never going to want to change. He's never, if he even wants to keep living, that's what my fear was, is you take away a person's chance of, truly getting back out in society, and it does do something to your head. So I didn't want that on him. I didn't want that on his family. And so I figured if we could just do with, if he does get out, he has to deserve it and he has to earn it. And that's on him.
There were several outlets that interviewed him from jail. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I did watch the one. I know he believes we got it wrong, but when we looked at all the evidence we had to look at, there was just too much swaying against him. And it's like I said, if he would have provided some more proof that there was an actual conspiracy going on, we would have probably had a hung jury, because one of our jury members, she wanted to look at it from that point of view, as you are an innocent man being accused of something you didn't do, which is your right. So we decided to try to do that for her. We started at this conspiracy theory, went down that rabbit hole. We really tried to follow it, but it just ended. And then the only theory we had left was, well, you're the one with motive. We have these texts, we have these videos, we have all this downloaded data. It's too hard to defute for us. So that's why the deliberation honestly took so long as it did, is we went, tried to be as thorough as we could.
Was there like a piece of evidence or a moment that sealed the deal for you? Because I know you said your vote was consistent throughout.
I'd probably have to say it was the comparison between the walk that they did kind of near the end. Like, that was a good final side-by-side that I've been wanting to see throughout the whole case, because we only ever got to see him maybe walk the one time, because, the court doesn't like you to see the defendant in a state of vulnerability where they're detained or something like that. So that really helped for us, because a lot of us did notice, at that point, the mannerism and how he held his arms while he walked was very similar, if not identical, to the suspect. So we're just like, that really did do a lot of the turning point for at least one of the jurors, I know for sure.
And I know you guys had asked for the side-by-side walk video that was shown during Hamner's rebuttal during the closing arguments. But I guess that wasn't presented as evidence, though, so you guys weren't able to get that specifically?
We managed to find the separate videos and
pull it up on two laptops?
Yes, exactly.
That's what I assumed was going to happen.
Yep.
Let me see if there was any other questions from people I asked on social media. I know a lot of people wanted to know about the narrative testimony.
Yeah, that was a first. We asked the lawyers too if that was particularly common, and they said no, it is not. So
yeah, a lot of people just asking about the narrative testimony and his one person asked, did any of the jurors feel lectured during his narrative testimony about how they should see his version of facts or probate laws?
Yeah, that was something I've never learned before. It's like, don't get me wrong, it was, insightful to learn what he actually did to, cause the conspiracy he believed happened. So it's just like, those facts were, important, but at the same time, they didn't seem to pertain to the case altogether. It was like, we're learning about this whole probate thing happening, but we're here for a murder trial. It's like, it was almost like two things in one trial. It was it was a little odd for me, but I did try to follow along as best as I could, for the sake of doing my duty, so.
But it was difficult.
It was.
So were there a total of 3 holdouts or 2 holdouts?
It started mainly with just the 3. So
3 holdouts, got it.
The 3, because it was like the one was unsure, and then she switched over to the guilty verdict.
And I know there were some enhancements, like the willful, deliberate, and premeditated, and then a lot of helicopters and planes today, and then the lying in wait, and then there was also the elderly abuse. Elderly abuse, I mean, I think that's pretty easy to check off because he was over 60 years old. But how about the other 2? How were you guys able to decide on those?
Well, I think the deadly weapon one for us was a no-brainer for just how severe his throat was slashed, and you don't do that with just any kind of weapon. So it's like, yeah, we had to give him the deadly weapon for that. And then the lying in wait, we saw it in the video. He went back there, and then seconds after, Gurman comes out and deliberately goes back to that corner to check it out. So it's just like it almost to us seems very premeditated and deliberate.
So once you guys got the guilty of first-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon, the other ones, it seemed like they were pretty easy to check off.
Yeah, we thought we were maybe filling out the form wrong as we were doing it, because like it did seem like the same thing every time we were checking it off. But as we were reading the top, that's when we noticed they are all subsequential charges. So that's when we realized, okay, well, let's just fill it out to be sure, because we know what we're going with. So let's fill it out with as accurately as we could. So.
And for the deliberation for sentencing, it took much shorter. Was there any holdout?
At first, yeah, we did have a lot of people down at the bottom. They wanted to do the 50 to 20 years. A lot of them just thought, that was going to be long enough because, after 50, he's just going to be an old man anyway. And then he doesn't have spend his whole life in prison. But we kind of mentioned how Mr. Hamner made a comment, when somebody gets life, even with parole, they're going to be surveilled and watched even if they do get released. They are going to have to, still maintain their good citizenship. They're not going to just be able to revert and go back to the way they were. It's a lot harder, at least, I should say. And then we did have a couple who wanted just to stay life without. And that was mainly, like I said, because of the testimony from Mr. Gehrman's family. That really resonated with them, and they just felt like if that was me, I would really want somebody to be put away. And that's when we kind of had the conversations, and we tried to really just, hammer on the point that even if he gets with parole, he has to earn it. It's up to him. And we've seen kind of how he is when he wants to represent himself, and he seeks these appeals. He might not get it because he tries very hard. And it's like, granted, that is your right to try to earn your innocence and prove your innocence and get your freedom. But it is ultimately going to be a hard trip for him, I think, with all the outstanding evidence against him.